Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here with Ram V. Good to see Ram.
Good to see you again, John.
As always, man, absolutely. And congratulations on the big announcement. We are all looking forward to it. Does it start in June? Batman Gotham Nocturne?
It starts in July, I believe. Yeah.
Gotham Nocturne and Detective Comics. That's great, man. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting.
What can you tell us about the story?
Yeah, I've mentioned a little bit of this in the press release itself, but to me, sort of my first experiences with Batman had always been this kind of tragic, almost gothic, poetic character, because my first introduction to Batman was the animated series, really. And so I kind of wanted to bring that blanket of tragedy to the Batman character and world, which I felt we hadn't seen in quite some time in comics. And what better way to do that than to use the medium of the Gothic opera, which is this kind of famously tragic medium, if you will. And so, yeah, so it is a quintessentially Batman story. There's a mystery involving demons running around the streets of Gotham, and Batman contending with his own inner demons, if you will, all laid out under this banner of a Gothic opera, which becomes kind of the lens for us to view all the other characters in Gotham as well. So it's going to be one of those stories, much in the tradition of Long Halloween or Dark Victory, where you kind of get a tour of Gotham's the rogues gallery of Batman, if you will, as the narrative proceeds.
Is it a solo Batman story? Will there be his usual sidekicks, or is it just Batman against the villains?
I mean, it's very difficult for me to sort of quantify that one way or the other. There will be other characters involved, whether they are what you would consider as the usual Bat family, whether they are villains who happen to find themselves on a different part of the equation this time, or whether they are good people who happen to find themselves on the opposite side of Batman. That we will have to see.
Interesting. Okay, so are you really playing up the analogous to the Gothic opera and everything? Is it a heightened, you know what I mean, or is it an
yeah? I mean, the best way I can describe it is the drama, the melodrama, and the aesthetics, the mythopoetic aesthetics of an opera are all dialed up to 11. So for me, I think some of the best parts of Batman for me are like evocative of that kind of Shakespearean poetry and tragedy, and characters stood against long windows with lightning crackling outside. And I did feel like we had lent, I mean, all of these stories, very successful ones in the recent past, have kind of lent into the gritty realism of Batman. And I was like, no, forget that. Let's go into the dark, poetic unrealism of Batman,
Sure. Der Fledermaus, I know, as every now and then a few Batman creators have kind of played with that.
Sure.
Is that something that you've considered writing this story as well?
To an extent. I'm also taking inspiration from, Phantom of the Opera. I'm also taking inspiration from Carmen, also taking inspiration from some of the really old, almost religious bent operas, if you will. Certainly music influenced from, Stabat Mater with Pergolesi and all of that stuff. But also I'm taking some very modern inspiration as well, in that I think there are a lot of films and novels that I would say today fall into the category of neo-operatic. Tarsem Singh's Cell and The Fall come to mind immediately, so they're quite influential for me. But that kind of, I guess the best analog I could give you is imagine a Wes Anderson film that is dark and poetic and operatic in that kind of flattened set design and heightened drama amongst the characters.
Very cool, man. And Raphael Albuquerque is your one of your artists, and Dave Stewart, of course, on colors and everything. Very great team. Very excited.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Rafa actually, for a very long time, has been one of my favorite sort of bat artists, even though surprisingly he has not done a lot of Batman work. In that he did the All Star Batman, and then he's always done covers for Detective, but not quite as much interiors as you might think. So I was very excited when he said yes to coming on board, because certainly some of my favorite Batman images are Raphael Albuquerque images. So
That's excellent. You had him in mind for this? I mean, it a short list of artists?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I discussed with my editors. Again, I think because this is such a aesthetic forward way of pitching a Batman story. I went in and I said, look, this is how I want it to look, and can we find people who are in the vein of this kind of aesthetic? So I mean, there were quite a few amazing artists that we could have approached, but we chose not to, because we were really thinking of people who were doing a certain kind of work. And I think uh, Rafa pretty much epitomizes that kind of work that we were looking for. It's kind of long shadows, flowing capes, and lots of attention to insinuated drama, if you will.
It's you're describing almost, and I know obviously Raphael's a different artist, but what you're describing kind of reminds me of Marshall Rogers' approach to Batman in terms of that the cape and the costume really are
Yeah,
heightened in terms of their presentation.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. A lot of people, the moment we said Gothic opera, also went to Kelly Jones Batman, and
Yes,
that era of it,
very
and
much
and
so.
certainly, we may not replicate that look, but that feel of like the
Yeah,
shadows are moving as I watch the panels, that feel is certainly something that we wanted to infuse. So
that's excellent, man. Here, Mark McGrath, another positive comment. Congratulations. Very excited for this. From a writing perspective, Rom and Chip Zdarsky are going to be one hell of a Batman 1-2 punch. Absolutely, man. Very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I'm very excited to be launching alongside Chip's run on Batman as well. Um, we had a chance earlier on to chat about some Batman related, books interconnecting kind of stuff. Teeny Howard was there as well. So it's nice to,
Great.
yeah, it's nice to be able to connect, and although I can't ever reconcile how there are two books with Batman that are also in continuity, but that's the beauty of comics, right? Like it's rife with contradictions until suddenly it is not, and everything makes sense. So
All right. Well, you just answered my question. I guess it is an in continuity story because I wasn't sure if this is.
yeah, yeah, it is an in continuity story. It sits alongside the Batman run, um, but also I think because we are so aesthetically different and pushing in distinct directions, it, I can do a lot more than I would have been able to do if it was all in the same direction and all kind of telling the same story. If you will.
That's outstanding, man. Well, and also, man, they're letting you play with all the toys over at DC. It seems. I mean, you wrapped up your Justice League Dark,
Yeah,
and then two coming. Of course, another volume of Swamp Thing
yeah,
as
yeah,
well with Mike, and I'm really glad that that's working out so well. And Daniel points out, hey, I'm glad you're watching, Daniel. He can't wait for your Aquaman as well.
yes. I'm writing a Aquaman Black Label 3-issue series called Andromeda with Christian Ward on art. And yeah, yeah, it does. It's been years of kind of putting my head down and focusing on the work, and I continue to do that, but it does really feel like this past year, um, there's that level of trust in terms of, okay, we get it, you know what you're doing. So I guess we're also more comfortable with your fingerprints on these characters. So it does feel like that, and that's nice. You don't want to be doing work for a decade and then still having to convince people that you know what you're doing. So I suppose I must be doing something right.
No, I think yeah. Once they get wise to you, Rom, I think they do know that you know what you're doing. So it's been fine. Honestly, man, I always especially trumpet these Savage Shores, and that's what's
Yeah,
cool,
thank you,
man, is
thank you.
that you really laid the ground with that, and with Layla Starr as
Yeah.
well. You've laid the groundwork with your creator own stuff, and now it's great to see that the big two are, or at least one of the big two is paying attention. I mean, are you exclusive to DC?
No, no, I'm not. In fact, I'm currently writing both Venom and Carnage over at Marvel as well. So,
Moron than I am. Yes. All right, I'm paying attention to DC, and I wasn't paying attention to Venom and Carnage.
I'm doing too many books. That's the moral of the story.
Well, and again, this is great. Oh God, Scott says too. He's waiting for more Paradiso as well.
Oh man, deep cuts.
That's great. No, that's fantastic, man. Absolutely. Um, and also, Alex says he just picked up your adaptation of Quake.
Yeah, that was a while back, and that was a bit of a wild comic to do. In that, um, it was with Titan, and they approached me and they said, "You're interested in writing like video game adjacent comics?" Well, like, "Yeah, I'm a gamer." They said, "Do you want to write Quake?" And it was at that moment where I suddenly had these like flashbacks of me as a teenager, kind of sat in front of my computer, just going headshot, headshot, headshot. Um, but yeah, it was nice to be able to craft a narrative for a game that had been quite sparse on narrative until then.
That's funny. And he says he found it in a back issue bin, saw your name, and he had to get it. That's excellent.
Awesome.
Um, Now, Josh wants to know, and again, we don't want you to spoil, but obviously, based on your Catwoman run, will we see possibly Catwoman in the story?
Possibly. I think we'll have to introduce that a bit slow, because since we're telling like this kind of expansive story, which you will see once you've seen issue one. There's a lot of groundwork to be laid. So characters coming in and going out will be fairly regular, and so I would be very surprised if Selena wasn't in there at some point.
Understood. Yeah, and again, another great run. You really did a hell of a job with Catwoman. It was a pleasure to read, and I think that's why we're all
Thank
excited
you.
to
Thank
see
you.
what you're
Yeah.
going to do more with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of there were a lot of threads that were laid during that run that I'd like to continue to pull at. So I keep nudging my editors to go like, can I get this character in here since no one's using it?
So tell me about this Black Label Aquaman thing. What can you tell us about that story?
Yeah. I was approached by my editors to go like, hey, looking for new books at Black Label. Um, we want to use sort of well-known characters, part of the DC canon, but look at interesting new stories to tell, new approaches to take with them. And immediately, like almost without the gap of a breath, I said, "Let me do underwater survival horror Aquaman, please." Um, it had been this kind of story idea that had rolled around in my head for so long in different forms, but it really is, for whatever reason. I think last time we talked about these Savage Shores, I discussed it, where different pieces of different things kind of just sit in my head, and then at some point they fall together, and it's this perfect amalgamation of story. Aquaman Andromeda was kind of like that. Event Horizon, The Thing, The Cube, all of those pieces in my head, and then I was reading a book called the Rifter trilogy by Peter Watts. I think is a science fiction trilogy. That, and then this opportunity to pitch, and I went, oh yeah, of course, this is an Aquaman story. And so yeah, I pitched it. They loved it. We discussed artists, and then Christian Ward's name came up, and I think everyone in the room quote unquote room just went, "Oh yeah, of course it's underwater horror. Who else other than Christian would you try to get on this book?" Uh, I think Christian was perfect. I know he had scheduling issues that he had to contend with, but it was really nice to see that he was so excited about the project that he actually made room to be able to do it. Um, which I'm very thankful for. Christian's an amazing collaborator.
It's a real distinct design where it's
Yeah,
somewhere in between movie Aquaman and comic book Aquaman. I like that. I think
yeah,
it's
to an
a good
extent.
amalgam.
Also, because it ties in with the idea behind the story so much. One of my first sort of interactions with Christian was to say, "Hey, we should make this Aquaman feel like he's an underwater myth, uh, the kind of legend that sailors tell to each other on dark nights when the sea is calm and you're telling exchanging stories." Um, and that kind of led to me sharing an image of a 100-year-old statue that had fallen underwater and had just stayed there. And there were like barnacles and coral and stuff growing all over it. And I shared that with him, and he went back and did this design and came back with it, and it was just perfect because it really does feel like comic book Aquaman. Also feels like movie Aquaman, but also feels like this kind of you know Greco-Roman myth that you tell stories about to this day, and no one actually expects to encounter.
That's great, man. And again, it kind of feels like it dovetails into your interpretation of Swamp Thing as well, and that this Aquaman is much more elemental and
Yeah,
more yeah. I mean, I like that. I really do. I remember.
yeah, I really, yeah, I do think there's a interesting sort of duality with Aquaman, which has existed in a different form with Swamp Thing, but I've kind of pushed Swamp Thing into a similar place with Levi and Swamp Thing being able to switch back and forth between human and Swamp Thing forms. With this, certainly there's this element of what's it like to be a myth and a legend, but also have a part of you that is very intensely just human. And so, maybe you don't want to ride the storms over the ocean. Maybe you just want to sit on a beach and watch the sun go down. And I feel like that is a real an emotional beat that I haven't seen explored before. So
Interesting. So yeah, there's kind of an internal conflict
yeah, yeah,
between Arthur and his role as King of the Sea and everything.
yeah, yeah. What am I? Am I a god or am I just a human? And is one powerful than the other, more powerful than the other, or is one more doomed than the other, if you will?
That sounds great. Oh no, that's really cool. 3 issues. When does that start?
That starts in June. First issue is out in June, and yeah, I'm very excited to see what people make of it. It is a very unexpected Aquaman story. Let me put it that way.
That's cool. That sounds great, man. All right, Jared has a good question. Will you have the opportunity to write your White Witch character again after Batman Urban Legends?
I may. Again, part of the joy for me in comics also is to just leave threads that I'm picking up characters that haven't been seen in 30 years. But if they hadn't been written 30 years before, I wouldn't be picking them up. So there's a part of me that also just wants to kind of walk away from these characters that I've made, knowing that 30 years from now, someone will pick something up and it'll be a thing. So part of me also wants to watch that. Part of me also wants to just reuse the characters that I keep making as well.
That
So we
sounds
shall
great, man.
we shall see. A non-committal answer at best.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You mentioned earlier, Daniel was wondering if we're going to see any classic Batman villains in your run, but you've already said, yeah, we will probably see
Oh
some
yeah,
more.
very very much so. Um, Also, what excites me is we will see them all through the lens of this kind of operatic narrative,
Yeah,
uh, which, yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of the Batman villains, and the reason they've lasted for so long, they're such powerful characters, is that every interpretation of them changes them in subtle ways, and they are renewed by that, if you will. Um,
100%.
So I feel like part of what the story will do is renew some of these villains and the way we look at them.
I agree with you, man. Well, hell, we're seeing it right now. I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch the new movie yet. I
Yeah,
got it on HBO Max. Have you watched the new movie?
yeah, I did. I caught it a bit after everyone else did, but I did manage to actually go to the cinema and watch it there. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. Um, I thought it was a great kind of progression from the Nolan Dark Knight stuff, which had again like lent into the realism of it all, and now here was the Batman, which, in my opinion, kind of lent into the realism of it, but added a little bit of sort of surrealist drama to it all, and the way they looked at Gotham and the way they represented these characters. So yeah, very exciting.
That's cool, man. No, and again, like you said about what you want to do with the villains and stuff, we saw really different interpretations in the
Yeah,
Batman. And yeah, again, I mean, well, I'm aware of that. I should say I haven't watched it yet, but I can't, man, I can't find like a good 2+ hours to sit down and watch something. And really now with with it being on HBO Max, I can pause and obviously
yeah.
watch it at my own level and everything. But funny. All right, let's see here. Good comments. I'm going to come back to him in just a second. We're talking to Ram V, and we've got more discussion and more of your questions in a second. We're going to take a break and come right back here on Word Balloon.
Every part of comics and artwork is a form of communication with other people. It's not just a, here, let me direct my thoughts at you as a dictation of concept, but it's hoping to convince you of how cool you think a visual could be or a story could be. And you're trying to communicate ideas in one part storytelling and greater part just graphic impact. You're hoping to relate a sense of energy, urgency, and enthusiasm to people. That there's a lightning of spirit that comes out of superheroes that has always worked for me. That it isn't really about the practicality of what they might do, it's not the practicality about grown men punching each other in costumes. It really isn't about that. It's a visual metaphor. And that metaphor could be for a lot of things, but it's mostly just about the energy and enthusiasm that can be found in the fun of life.
Having a good conversation with Ram V. I hope you're enjoying it here on Word Balloon. We're getting good questions from everybody as well, and also observations. Mark McGrath says The Many Deaths of Layla Starr was one of the best, if not the best comic of last year. Certainly the most original. Just a joy to experience.
Thank
So
you.
that's pretty awesome. Raphael. All right, now I'm trying to figure out what he's saying here. Maybe you'll be able to. He says it was never clear to him at the end of your run. What wasn't clear? Let's go back. Here we go. What is the status of the relationship between Batman and Catwoman ending at the end of your Catwoman run? And then he says it was never clear to me. I didn't feel it was addressed in James Tynan's run either. And he says, I'm sorry to have to take you to your previous work, considering that you surely want to talk about your current and future work. Well, no, yeah, but Rob's
Yeah, the status the status is what it has always been, is quote unquote it's complicated.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was actually talking about this, and we're going to go off on a philosophical tangent here, but I was
Good.
talking about this with someone else on Twitter, where I said I think we have a need to reconcile everything that happens across these books, and I think that is partly a good thing, but also at some point you have to be comfortable with it all being contradictory. Black is white and blue is red sometimes, um, and I think that's part of the joy. If you go back and look at the great sort of mythologies of the world, they are full of contradictions. Someone says this person was that god's son. Like, no, that person was actually that god's brother. and you can find a million interpretations of that relationship across mythology. And I imagine some part of me maybe is egotistical enough to believe that we are all of the creators involved in comics are writing like a modern day mythology, if you will, and so some of that is bound to be rife with contradictions, and you should embrace it. So that relationship contradicts itself every Wednesday. Embrace it.
Sure. Well, and it can't, as much as we want to resolve. Well, it's interesting because right now, Tom King is wrapping up his
Yeah,
Batman
exactly.
Catwoman book, and it has a resolution to that. And certainly, there's an established relationship, and you see it to its end.
Yeah,
I mean, we've already explored that in the story and stuff. But as far as I think, a lot of the monthly books and everything, and the regular books, no, it has to be ongoing. The struggle, the
yeah,
conflict has to be
and
there as much as we want them to be together. They always do have to kind of, be at
yeah,
odds.
and it's natural in that my take on that relationship is necessarily going to be different from anyone else's. James' take on it is going to be different from Tini Howard's take on it is going to be different from Chip's take on it. So, um, yeah, I'm sorry there isn't a firmer answer for you to stand on, but hey, that's comics.
There you go. Well, all right. Magic K wants to know about Batman and Talia's relationship in your and potentially in this upcoming run.
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, so I'm going to hold my tongue on that. Other than to say, I think Talia has a very important role to play on different sides of whatever line you might draw through Batman in this narrative.
Well, and I agree with both. What Magic K and also Paul are saying here in terms of, yeah, I'm excited for the renewed focus on Talia because again, I think she is a very she's I mean, as much as Catwoman is there, I think Talia has established herself as being a very important person in Batman's life, and certainly not only because of Damian, but even well before Damian and stuff. And I always felt that was a weird kind of thing that Batman both agreed to be part of, but also regretted being part of at various times. I mean, there's that.
Yeah, and I really like that way of thinking about it as more important than the pairing up of characters is the importance of that person in the life of Batman. Similarly, what is that person doing outside of their relevance to Batman? Because Talia in herself is also a character, and she has imperatives and motivations and machinations that don't necessarily feature Batman at all. And so I think we'll get to see some of that. I think we'll get to see some of that lending to Talia's character development outside of her sort of mirroring her relationship with Batman, if you will.
Understood. If Jack, good question. Do you like Superman, and will you have a chance to write Superman?
Um, I like a lot of different characters. I do certainly, obviously, it would be very remiss of me to say that I don't like Superman or whatever, because I think Superman and Batman were characters that I grew up with, really. So yes, I do. Um, Whether I would want to write Superman depends on what kind of story I get to tell, because I don't write things based off of characters. I pitch ideas, and I go to editors and talk to them based off of I have a story to tell that is unique and hasn't been told, and it's doing something interesting. So um, I might one day have a story that I can tell with Superman, and when I do, I'm sure you will find out about it.
That's cool. Jared wants to know, as we talk about Talia, what your thoughts are about Damien. Would you be interested in writing Damien someday?
Again, yeah, I'm not gonna sort of get into uh, characters that might potentially have things to do in the run. So I would say universally, I'm interested in all characters in the Batman mythos now that I'm writing this run. Uh, it really is, the scope of it really is something that spans all of Gotham, outside of Gotham, across countries in the world. So I have an opportunity really to pull a lot of characters into the story, and so I'm sure there will be a wide array of characters that people both know of very well, and maybe a few more obscure characters as well.
Uh, Chowette, 1982. Obviously, the Gothic opera seems to be a big theme in your new tech takeover. Yes. Are you, and you've discussed this. Do you want to throw out any other operas that you're a fan of? Well, you mentioned it earlier, but
No, I mean, personally, I'm more. I could tell you, pieces of classical music and operatic music that I am a fan of. Um, Obviously, one of the earliest things that I watched was Carmen, with Placido Domingo, you know,
sure.
playing a role in that movie, um, and that had like a big influence on me in terms of, like, I still remember images from a thing that I saw when I was a kid. Um, but beyond that, it is really my interest in the aesthetic than any particular opera, and you shouldn't expect to see me trying to replicate an aesthetic that has been there for decades. Rather, you should expect to see that aesthetic influencing a very modern storytelling approach. So I think modern neo-operatic gothic noir might be a genre once we're done with this. So
Is there a Spotify playlist you might construct for this?
there will be one, and potentially we might look into ways of making that experience a part of the comic book issue itself. So we'll see how that works out.
Man, seriously, with Warner's music library, I've been bugging Dave Gibbons for years, literally, to do that for the originals and come up with a great kind of playlist and stuff like that. So that's great to hear, and I look forward to that possibility. I think that's wonderful. So let's see here. I'm looking at some of these other questions, and I told David that he's got. If you want to hear more about Aquaman, everybody, you might want to rewind later on to the beginning of the conversation where we I think gave a good preview of what to expect in
Yeah,
the
there's a very snazzy, newly made DC trailer out that came out yesterday as well. So go check that out.
Cool. That's great, man. Honestly, I love and again, this also plays to the idea of having a song list and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm so glad that everyone is kind of thinking along these lines and really
yeah,
kind of making trailers and getting more expressive with promoting these things as opposed to the old ad that we would see in the middle of a comic book.
yeah. And I think that really is. Uh, I run into people a lot who have this kind of very purist view of comics, and that, oh, you shouldn't be making comics if you're interested in film. You shouldn't be making comics if you're interested in other mediums. No, you should be welcoming to people from all kinds of mediums, because that kind of cross pollination is what evolves your stuff. Like, we wouldn't, without motion comics, we wouldn't be making the trailers today. Someone thought it was possible to animate comic book panels, and so now today we have trailers. Maybe one day we'll have animated comics too. Who knows? But the idea is that art form and medium evolves when you get people from all kinds of mediums coming in and trying to do something. So
Totally, man. No, I mean, good Lord, Jack Kirby himself, all those great mixed media images that he would put in the comics, where he would put real photographs along with his art and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Constantly influenced by the movies that he was seeing and stuff.
Yeah, and he wrote prose as well, from what I understand. So yeah, dabble in all kinds of things.
Absolutely. Where Lewis agrees, comic trailers are amazing. Absolutely, man. Whether it's create your own stuff or what the big two put out there and everything.
Yeah.
So you'll forgive me. I am not a big Carnage or Venom fan, which is likely why I missed that stuff. But truly for the audience, what do you want to say about Carnage and Venom right now? What's happening with these characters?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Venom run has been out for a while, so I think I'm currently writing issue 12 or something like that. So yeah, it's co-written with Al Ewing. In
That's
that
great.
Eddie Brock is out in space being Venom God. Hello, Henry. And Dylan Brock, his son, is back on Earth trying to figure out how to fit into his dad's clothes, if you will. And yeah, there are a few twists and turns. Maybe not all is not as it seems with his father. And we'll see how that story progresses from there.
How old is Dylan? Again, you'll forgive me, man, because truly, I'm just like not a Venom guy, not a Carnage guy, but I am curious.
Yeah,
to
there
hear
was
that
there was
Eddie's
this
son is
whole
in there.
stuff at the end of Donnie's run where they went into like a pocket dimension, and Dylan aged up a little bit as
Okay.
well as Eddie. So I think that puts him somewhere around mid-teens. Yeah, that's
Okay.
what my headcanon says.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
On the Carnage side of things, very exciting. We've just had an issue 1 where Carnage is no longer bonded to a host. Cletus Cassidy is gone, or so it seems, and there's a serial killer who seems to be auditioning to become the next host of Carnage. Obviously, things don't go as planned. There's also a police officer trying to track down this serial killer who might be getting in over his head. There you go. That's the setup for issue 1, which came out last month. So
who's your artist?
On that one, so on Venom, it's Brian Hitch.
Well, that doesn't suck. That's right, the great Hitch.
No,
absolutely.
of course, and I'm very excited to see what he does with these next couple of issues, because I think they are, in my head, they're very Brian Hitch-esque issues. And on Carnage, the artist is Francesco Manna, who did work previously on Ultraman at Marvel.
Oh, wow, that's great. Yeah. Very cool in both cases. Absolutely, man. Very interesting.
All right, yeah. I think it's gonna be a wild couple of symbiote comics, if you will.
Okay. Now, MM wants to know that Beyond Nocturne is your detective run ongoing, and this is just the first arc.
Or yeah. It's. I mean, the first arc. I mean, Nocturne is the name of the whole thing.
Oh,
the first arc is just called Overture, much like an opera.
Okay.
So the first 4 issues are just an overture, if you will. It's only after the 4 issues that we get into Act 1. So, yeah, it's been one of those stories that I had for the longest period of time done these kind of short runs, if you will. Layla Starr is 5 issues. Deep Savage Shores is 5 issues. Paradiso, until date, was before Swamp Thing was the longest thing I had done.
Well, but then Catwoman, you had a long run.
Yeah, but even so, that was also 12 issues. So
I thought it was longer. Okay.
Yeah, so that was 12 issues. It's only Swamp Thing now that has gone up to 16, which will be the longest thing I've done so far. But with this kind of with the new slate of books that I'm doing, both Venom and Carnage are intended to be much longer runs. And Detective was certainly very early on. Went to my editors and said, "Look, I'm gonna take a leap of faith. I'm gonna say this is a long run with a long-term payoff at the end of it." So, yeah, hopefully people enjoy it, and the support, as it has with Swamp Thing, will entail this being a run of many issues.
Excellent. Eduardo wants to know: is there any chance we'll see you writing Cheshire again?
Yeah, stay tuned to the Detective Comics run.
There you go. Very cool. Like you said, you've kind of laid down some threads that you will likely pick up on. So that's great to hear. Mark says Swamp Thing certainly came back strong. Number 11 was a bravura continuation of the story. Levi is a fantastic addition to the legacy of the character. A little sad that there are only 6 issues to this extension, and he plans for Swamp Thing beyond issue 16.
Not as it stands. Also, partly because there are only so many stories I can write at any given time, and I'm already doing more than I should, as my doctor reminds me. but also the beauty of doing something like a contained 6-issue thing is that at the end of issue 16, I can leave it in a place where, I could come back, 5 years later and decide, hey, I would love to do a Swamp Thing story again. And if the planets align, if that's possible, it might be possible just to pick up from there. So more than anything, I'm just happy that we created this character, and at the end of 16, we'll probably leave the character in a place where all things are primed for them to be a part of the DCU, as you will.
That's great, man. No, congratulations, truly, on this character. I agree with Mark. What you and Mike have done with this idea has
Yeah.
really been terrific, and truly broken through the paradigm that I think a lot of creators were stuck in with Alec Holland
Yeah.
being Swamp Thing. And, it kind of became, all right, well, it was hints of what made the, Alan Moore and the Veitch and all the other great writers and artists, I mean, down the line and stuff that have done great things with Swamp Thing, where it had to be something new to, I
Yeah.
think, say something else with the character. So,
Yeah, I mean, my personal motivation is always to do something new. That's why,
Sure.
When people ask me, like, what character would you like to write? No, it's always, what story would I like to write? And number one in that has to be, am I doing something new with it? And so I'm very glad that was the case. As you say, there was not only, a paradigm shift from what creators were doing, but also there was a lot of reticence from some of the fans who were like, oh, I don't want to read something that's not Alec Holland. Why are you changing this?
Sure.
Which is always going to be there. There's always resistance to change.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
I firmly believe that if you execute your work with nuance and elegance and insight, and it really speaks to people, then it doesn't matter where your character comes from, because it connects on a more fundamental level that we are all human. And I'm really glad to have been able to done that. To have done that with a character that comes from where I come from, as an Indian character as well. Yeah.
Sure. 100%, man. No question. Henry wants to know what your basic process is. Is it the Marvel method? Is it full script? How do you work out the dialogue?
It's a very weird process. I write an outline, which, through experience, I kind of know how much story will fit in an issue. Although I get that wrong sometimes, and then it's all hell breaks loose. But for the most part, I know what goes in an issue. I write an outline, and then I just start writing dialogue. I let the visuals and the descriptions kind of play out in my head, but I'm writing the whole thing as an exchange between characters, until we get to action stuff, and then I'll just write, there's a bunch of action over here, and then I'll continue with the dialogue. And then once I have the dialogue in and those exchanges feel good, then I start the work of going in and writing descriptions to all the panels. So my script is dialogue first, and then figure out the visuals of it after, almost. Of course, the action stuff, it's easier just to go to an artist and be like, hey, here are some ideas I had, but I'll let you figure this out because it's visual direction, and you're probably 100 times better at it than me.
I get it. Absolutely, man. All right, let's see if we can wrap on this one. And again, with the idea that, Prakasha isn't, or pardon me, Preksha Kumari is asking, can you shed more light, of course, non-spoilery, about Bruce's inner demons that will be questioned in your run on Detective?
Whatever I'm going to say without being a spoiler is going to be very rudimentary. So I'm not going to say much beyond inner demons. There's a history of Bruce and demons with a lot of different writers, Morrison specifically. So we'll probably be leading into some of that. But on a more human level, I think there's that sense of an impending mortality, impending change, that I'm interrogating through the arc, both for Bruce, but also for Gotham. In that, I think Gotham has been through these kind of repetitive cycles of being the same city that it was, 30, 40 years ago. But what if that were to change and Gotham were suddenly to become a completely different city?
Very cool. All right, man. That's excellent. Well, it's coming up in July. It's Batman. It's Detective Comics. Excuse me. I keep wanting to call it Batman Gotham Nocturne and not Detective Comics Gotham Nocturne. And there you see the group behind it: Ram and Raphael Albuquerque and Dave Stewart. I have no doubt it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I gotta say a word about Dave as well, who is such an important piece of this kind of aesthetic element, because I think Dave and Mike in their work together probably define what the color palette for a modern day Gothic opera should feel like with their work on the Hellboy stuff. So very, very excited to have Dave as a part of that.
That's excellent, man. Does your story at all dovetail into what's happening with Justice League and everything?
No, I mean, I don't see it doing that anytime soon. In that, it was very much pitched as a fairly contained. Hey, look, I want to focus on this story for a while. There might be some, event repercussions of stuff that is happening across books, but for the most part, is a book that is preoccupied with itself.
Fair enough. Absolutely, man. Well, again, Gotham Nocturne in Detective Comics starts in July, and Aquaman Armageddon starts in June.
Andromeda. Aquaman,
pardon me,
Andromeda.
not Andromeda. I apologize.
No
Hey,
problem.
man, let's talk in July or something if we can.
Yeah.
Once Aquaman is running, and the same thing with Gotham Nocturne, and would love to touch back with you and stuff.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That'd be great.
That'd be great, man. All right, as always, Ram, I really, always appreciate your time. And
Same here.
thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Well, I feel the same. I guess you're going to be in Belfast for a signing or a convention or something coming up.
Yeah, I'll be in Belfast at Coffee and Heroes in June, right as Aquaman Andromeda comes out, and I know they're very excited. I saw a big stack of Layla Starr in the store, so I'll be signing a whole bunch of comics, and it'll be very exciting to meet everyone in Belfast. I've never been, actually, strangely, so should be an exciting time. It's my first out of UK travel since the pandemic ended. So
that's great, man. Well, and I hope to see over here on the other side of the ocean.
Yeah. I'll be at MegaCon. I'll be at San Diego, and then I'll be at New York as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm back on my traveling train, if you will.
Outstanding, man. Beautiful. All right. Well, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for hanging today.
Pleasure.
As always, really appreciate it. And everybody, great questions. Thank you very much. And I'm actually talking to, and I never say his name right. I'm going to get it right when we're actually talking. Pornsack Pichochet. And
yeah.
So it's I'm halfway there, and I'll I'll get the other half correct. What's that?
Yeah, Pichette Show.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
I know. I got to do it right. We're gonna talk about the wrap up to the Good Asian and a whole lot more.
Very, very good comic. It's
amazing comic.
I don't read a lot of them, but I've been following Pornsack's work since Infidel. Very, very excellent work. So big fan of his writing.
There you go. Well, yeah, jump to the other Word Balloon YouTube page here for my conversation with Pornsack, and that's coming up at the top of the hour. I double stacked today.
Excellent.
But thanks a lot for hanging, Rob, and everybody.
Enjoy.
Thank you for the excellent questions, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
See you later.